happy ending.
United States of America.
There was an earthquake in San Francisco.
And to the republic for which it stands.
Have you heard about the Model T?
One nation, under God.
The stock market crashed.
Indivisible.
President Truman dropped the atomic bomb.
With liberty and justice for all.
The gentle whisper of leaves rustling along a well-beaten path. The distant sounds of farming. Children's laughter. Voices coming seemingly out of the wilderness. Macomb County was just such a wilderness when the first settlers staked their claims and made a home for their families along the shores of Lake St. Clair and the fertile soil of what is now known as Macomb County. It's not difficult to understand the beckoning that settlers felt from this land of abundance. More than just a place to hunt and trap, the early settlers recognized the area as one in which they could raise their families and tend the land. The first settler, Lafayette Tucker, staked his claim in what is now Harrison Township, and it was there that education was a part of everyday life as early as 1794. The first building erected as a schoolhouse was built around 1815. A few years later, eager settlers were pushing ever northward into what is now Washington, Bruce, and Armada townships. As the old plank roads replaced Indian trails into what has become Washington, the hardy settlers who made their homes there had to contend with primitive conditions, including hard winters, untamed animals, and curious Indians peeking into the schoolhouse windows. Similar encampments could also be seen from the South River School in Mount Clemens, as the nearby waterways were used for both settler and native transportation. As the county grew, one-room schoolhouses graced the rolling farmlands and wooded trails. Their districts encompassed all of what is now Macomb County, north from 8 Mile Road to Boardman Road, west to the Oakland County line, and east to the lake. Although the conditions at times were harsh, the simple schoolhouses with their kerosene lamps and potbelly stoves provided an education for several generations of settlers before the turn of the century. Some of the names of the schools echo a legacy of forefathers and foremothers who lived and died in long-lost hamlets such as Meade, Milton, and Mount Vernon. Their legacies, the humble contribution of land, logs, or simple sweat and toil, built community schoolhouses, some of which still stand proudly today. Two schoolhouses in Macomb County have gained historical distinction. Both Warren's Bunnert School and East Point's Halfway School have, through the hard work and dedication of local historical societies, earned the distinction of state historical sites. Halfway sits just feet from its original site at 9 Mile and Gratiot. It provided education for the sparsely populated area known as Halfway until 1921. Some 19 miles north on Gratiot at 28 Mile Road, the Lowell School, in striking red, has stood in the same spot since the late 1800s. About that same time, in the same area, the Big Stone School at 27 Mile and Frost Roads was providing education for early Lenox and New Haven residents. The original site was known for its historical significance due to a 5-ton stone on the property around which local legend has it that Indians danced. The school has since been moved into New Baltimore and now graces the grounds of the Lighthouse Elementary at the corner of Will Lee and Washington Streets. Will Lee, a graduate of Olivet College, was Macomb County's first superintendent of schools and provided guidance for the organization of one-room and rural schools beginning in 1915. At that time, nearly 100 one-room schools dotted the county, including many whose origins and names are lost to time. Often named for the farmer or landowner who lent or leased all or part of an acre, names like Hosner, Donaldson, Behringer, and Thorrington were used to identify each school. At times, the schools were named for location or some natural feature, such as High Bank School and Cascade School. Still, some names remain a mystery. The Frog Mountain School, long since abandoned, yields no clue to the frog or to the mountain involved. Frog Mountain is still standing, and several one-room schoolhouses in Macomb County have been given a new life after being moved and renovated by local historical groups. The school section school in Richmond was restored and moved into Richmond in January of 1994. Shelby Township moved the Andrews School to the grounds of the Shelby Township offices in 1975. This move required the services of the Army Corps of Engineers and a U.S. Army transport crew. Weller's School, originally at 22 Mile Road in Gratiot, found a new home on the Chesterfield Township grounds after it was moved in the summer of 1996. The Sykes School in Romeo continues its life on the site of Westview Orchards. The school has been renovated and looks much as it did during the time it was in use. It is now open for instructional tours and talks for local school and other interested groups. At least 2 private homes in Macomb County were once one-room schools that have been renovated. Prestonville has been enlarged and is used as a home. The backstop for the baseball field, outbuilding, and original bell remain intact. Card School in Macomb Township has also been converted into a private home. Although a one-room school may now serve as a home or museum to some, the schoolhouses of Macomb County will always have a special place in the hearts of those students who attended them, and many happy memories still remain.
I started in 1937, kindergarten. My first teacher was a man, which is very unusual in those days. It was also the health school because it was on our farm. And it was nicknamed sometimes kind of fondly as the Coon Creek College because a Coon Creek ran by there also.
Moved from Grosse Pointe Woods to the country in 1942 in the fall, and so that's when I started the Behringer School. And I was in the 5th grade at that time. I had 3 younger brothers, one in the 2nd grade, and twin brothers that were in kindergarten.
Original school property was part of the farm that we now own. It was in the southeast quarter of section 22, and it was the portion that was on the east side of Gratiot and on the north side of 28 Mile Road.
Like the Sterling School, it was from like Sterling, the township of Sterling. And the school was Sterling. It was located on 17 Mile Road in Van Dyke. And that would have been like 1 acre of the farm that my parents owned. My dad and my mom.
Then I had one teacher of Florence Frith who came the year I was in 4th, and she was there for 5th and 6th grade. And she was one of the teachers I remember the most because she was a good disciplinarian. She was one that wanted us to learn, and she is still living, and she lives over in Marysville. We contact her once in a while, and I discovered that she told me one time that she was 18 the latter part of August, and then school started the day after Labor Day. Then I figured out that, well, I would have been 9, so she was twice as old as I was that particular year, but she didn't stay that way.
Experiences with the teachers were, I don't remember anything harshly done to me. They were good teachers. We had good teaching in those days. When we left that school, we knew how to add, multiply, divide. We knew our multiplication tables, spelling. We knew what we were taught. They demanded it, and we gave it.
This 18-year-old teacher wrote to her family, "I'm trying to make myself look older."
Two of the boys got in a fight, a 7th grade boy and a 6th grade boy. The new boy was in the 6th grade, but he was pretty good size. He was as big as the 7th grade boy. And they got in this argument, and he lived very close to the school. In fact, he lived the closest to the school of any of the other children. And he went home and told his dad, and his dad came back to school with the shotgun and said, "We are going to settle this right now." And my brother said, and you should have seen Mrs. Pomeroy. She was looking up at this man saying, "Oh, well, I think we can settle it. I don't think there's anything to worry about." It was just a small fight between two youngsters, and we'll take care of it. And it was something that hadn't happened in our school before.
Probably my teachers, I said, we had a man teacher for kindergarten and 1st grade. Then we had a young teacher, came in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade.
When you were in it.
When I was in it, yes. It's kind of unique. And I remember we knew that the war was on, and she would only stay if the man that she was going to marry would not be drafted. And we were all praying that he'd be drafted, but as luck had it, he wasn't, and she moved out.
Of what was happening in the world.
We knew when the war ended. We could see at that time you had a lot of open fields, and we heard the church bells ring. We heard the church in St. Clemens in Center Line. We heard the Sacred Heart in Roseville. We heard the church they had in East Detroit there, and we had Assumption down at 6 Mile Road. We could hear all those church bells ring.
Have current events, and they would want us to keep up on things that were going on in the world, even though at a young age you don't understand too much of that. But I remember looking through papers and trying to clip out something that would be of importance. So they made us aware that there is a big world out there and things were going on outside of our little school.
Every week we had a weekly reader and kept up on the war events. Of course, that was the primary social studies lesson always, the war. That was on everyone's mind. We had kids who had brothers, older brothers or uncles or something in the war, and they were worried, of course. And it was, when we had time, everyone had a pair of knitting needles. My 3 brothers knit, and so did I. When you got finished with your homework, we would knit squares 8 by 8, and then the teacher would sew them together, and we'd send them off for wounded soldiers who were coming back on ships. We collected milk pod, the silk from milk pods, and they sent it away to make life preservers.
Yes.
Life preservers, and that was very, that was probably the pertinent subject in school. When it came to the world around you, it was the war.
Well, on rainy days, why, of course, those that had Model T cars, why, their mother or dad brought them. Snow days, we didn't have such days as snow days to stay home. We had snow days where I can remember walking down a little plank road here, and the snow was crusty and almost as high as the fence, and it'd go pretty good until we broke through, and then we'd be up to our crotch and then have to dig ourselves out and try to get on top again. but there was walking most of the time. There weren't any ones that had, I don't recall anybody having a bicycle even in those days, and there weren't any of them that rode their horse, or I guess sometimes some would have been brought with a top buggy, you know, when it was raining, but the furthest anyone had to come was about 1.75 miles.
It was cold and snowbanks, but I don't know, we didn't seem to miss much. I think my dad took us sometimes with the bobsleigh when it was real bad. But it was cold, and the teacher didn't make us go out if it was real cold.
Teachers that drove in for school, for her school day, and she would come early in the morning so to get the fire going first. And I remember her walking 1 whole mile because the road was either muddy or couldn't get through for some reason or other.
I can only remember school being closed once, and it was because of rain, not because of snow. We were always able to walk to school because you went around the big snow drifts, and if you couldn't get around them on the road, you went out in the field or through the field and walked around them. But I think it was in 43, the spring of 43, Richard? Spring of 43, we had a lot of rain, sort of like this year. And we couldn't get to school because our school was between 2 bridges, a small one and a very large bridge. And the water was over the road and was over the bridges, and some of the bridges were washed out, and school was closed. All the country schools closed for a period of a few days until the water went down. You know. And I never remember the school being closed because of snow, however.
But one thing I do remember, I mentioned to my wife about a month ago, or maybe longer than that, I said it really hasn't snowed like it used to snow in those days because I could never see over the banks. But then I said I realized that I was only about 3 feet tall. So,
all the 8, well, really 9 classes because they did have kindergarten at that time. Maybe 1 or 2 kids in the kindergarten, but there was kindergarten. So like all 9 classes all in one room and everything, you know, and it was getting up, well, like the hours that are now, like 9 o'clock till 4 in the afternoon. And of course you had a recess in the morning and you had a noon hour, and the same thing in the afternoon. You had a recess in the afternoon. You were out at 4 o'clock.
But the same routine every day, you know, each class was brought up class by class, set at the front of the school. Teacher would teach us, we'd go back, and she'd bring up another class till all 8 grades were taken care of.
the classes started in the school itself on the, as you walked in the front door, the left side would be the kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd, 3rd row, then and so on up to the right-hand side where the 8th graders were, and we all were trying to attain that. We would go to the front, we would all be called, the class as a whole, maybe even 2 classes would be called up, maybe the 4th and 5th would be called up together. And we'd sit on a long bench and we'd do our recitations there. And we would work together quite often.
We made games out of some of our studying. My seatmate and I did our geography that way by often by one of us hunting up some remote place for the other one to then search for, and we would work on it real hard. It didn't help our geography very much because they were remote.
We had recess twice, and we would go out and play. Oh, we played ball. We played what they call anti-over, throw a ball over the school, and we had someone on either side, and we played pom pom pull away, may I, and then the winter we played fox and geese. You made a great big circle, and then cut it like into pieces, and you'd have to run in those spaces, and somebody tried to chase you, and in the center was the goal. When you got in there, they couldn't get you. So we really had a lot of fun.
Recesses, of course, were basically, I guess, the same as they are now, really. We'd play, games were a little different, innie ante over. It'd be a game where they throw the ball over the roof and somebody on the other side would catch it, run around, throw the ball at somebody else. If you were hit, then you were on their side. Our schoolyard wasn't very large. It was kind of a small, only about 1/3 of an acre. We had a ball diamond in front of the school, and I was left-handed hitting, and fortunately, when I hit the ball, we go down North Avenue. When I hit the road, it bounced down, so I was kind of lucky that way.
The front lawn was nothing but baseball, and we all got together and we played baseball there, and we had a good time.
You just went outdoors and played whatever you want to with your friends. Jacks, sometimes.
Our school was unique, I thought, coming from the city, in that we had no running water. So every day, 2 of the older children were picked to take the pail and cross 33 Mile Road, it was called Clay at that time, cross the road, climb over the fence, which was pretty well broken down, cross the farmer's field, and he had a flowing well at the end of his barn, and then we waited for the pail to fill up, and then the 2 of them would bring the water back to school, and we had half of it went for cleaning your hands, and the other half we used for drinking, and in hot days they had to make another trip back at lunchtime to get another pail of water.
The restrooms, shall I tell you where they were? Outdoors. And I do remember we had a wood-burning stove in the classroom, and the teacher bringing in the wood and feeding the fire, you know, with the wood. We would help, we pupils would help to bring in the wood.
During the winter time, it was interesting. Kids would bring lunches, and lots of times they'd bring coffee. But see, we didn't have no thermos bottles at that time. There was ketchup bottles with a cork in it, you know. And right where we put the coffee underneath the stoves around the circle. And about 11 o'clock, all of a sudden, pop! The cork would pop and hit the ceiling. That meant that the coffee was warm, see?
I think our Christmases were always special at the school. We always put on a program, and the parents always came in. We drew names, and if you could buy a gift for 5 or 10 cents in those days, that was a lot. And we would exchange gifts, but that was a very special night that was set apart once a year, where the families came together, all the parents and the children, and we always looked with great anticipation for that. I did, at least.
Christmas is about the most important one I remember. We used to have Christmas programs for the stage. It'd be the front of the school. The teacher would move her desk back. That area would be cleared out. There'd be a string of wire going across from one end to the other. Old sheets would be made for the curtains. And of course, they'd come about that far from off the floor. You see feet running around underneath there. But that would be about the highlight of the year, I think, was Christmas, and also the last day of school, a picnic. They would always take us maybe to Bloomer State Park, and we'd have ice cream and games and different things such as that. And that was mainly in the earlier years.
As far as the holidays are concerned, well, it was all observed, and I mean, and like sometimes there was like special events, like maybe the parents would be invited, and, you know, to the school at that time, and there would probably be, you know, certain little plays or something that we as children would put on for them and all. And oh, every once in a while, like even the parents would get together and all, and they'd call it like a box social, okay? That we usually was in the evening, and you know, the ladies all had to decorate up their boxes and fill it with their food, and then it was brought to the schoolroom. They had like an auctioneer.
One year we were voted to go to New Haven High and put on our play. And I was always chunky looking. Always. So they gave me the part of the fat girl in there. And that fit real good. They didn't have to dress me up too much for that. But I went. I thought it was a big honor. It was great for me to go there.
It was getting away too.
Yeah, it was getting away.
Yeah.
But every once in a while we had to go to New Haven High and we put on our little play. And that was a biggie.
One day they were working that old organ and a rat ran out of the organ. Well, that really made some excitement. When this rat came out of the organ, we started chasing it around the room, and the girls all headed for their coat room, and they got inside and closed the door, but there was room underneath the door that the rat got under the door. Well, then there was really some scurrying around in that room, and one of the heavier girls happened to land on the rat, and that killed it, so that was the end of the excitement that day.
I remember at psych school, I guess that was already written up in a paper. One of the students was quite mischievous, and the clock was stopping, and she told him to stop the pendulum and set the right time. Well, he put it 2 hours ahead, so we got out at 2 o'clock instead of 4, and she took the 2 o'clock streetcar. So she didn't know. I don't know what punishment he got if he did. He's mentioned that different times.
The ball went under the school. We didn't have a basement, of course, like most country schools, but we had a crawl space. And the people who evidently had to get under there at some time had knocked a hole in the stone foundation to crawl under, and it was just enough for a person to crawl